If you want to understand the terrifying economics of the commercial airline industry, look no further than American Airlines in early 2026. By all physical and logistical metrics, the company is an absolute behemoth. Tracing its corporate roots all the way back to a scrappy patchwork of Midwestern airmail carriers in 1926, the modern iteration of American Airlines Group Incorporated has grown into one of the largest logistical empires in human history. The company employs over 130,000 aviation professionals. This is a workforce larger than the population of many small cities, encompassing everyone from ramp agents throwing bags in the freezing rain to mechanics inspecting turbine blades, dispatchers calculating wind shear, flight attendants managing the cabin, and highly trained commercial pilots at the controls. Together, this massive workforce operates a staggering schedule of more than 6,000 flights every single day. Its vast, hyper-complex network links major United States fortress hubs to over 350 destinations spread across more than 60 countries. Each year, the airline successfully moves more than 200 million customers across the globe. Financially, this translates to astronomical amounts of money changing hands. In the 2025 fiscal year, the airline brought in a record-breaking $54.6 billion in total operating revenue. To put that into perspective, American processes roughly $149 million in revenue every single day, capped off by a record fourth quarter revenue of $14.0 billion. By sheer volume of cash flow, it dwarfs the gross domestic product of dozens of small nations. Handling such sums, one might assume it's a wildly lucrative enterprise. But in the commercial aviation industry, top-line revenue is an illusion. There is a massive structural difference between handling money and actually keeping it. After fuel, unionized labor, airport fees, and aircraft financing, the company posted a GAAP net income of just $111 million in 2025. That translates to GAAP earnings per diluted share of merely 17 cents. More shockingly, it means the overall profit margin for the world's physically largest airline hovered at a razor-thin 0.2%. Out of every $100 a passenger handed over for a ticket, the company walked away with roughly 20 cents in actual profit. An airline seat is an instantly perishable commodity. If a flight departs with an empty seat, the revenue potential is lost forever. But the fixed costs of operating the flight, fuel, crew salaries, lease payments, air traffic control fees, remain exactly the same. Airlines operate with incredibly high fixed costs. Because these fixed costs are so high, a flight only becomes profitable once it reaches a very specific break-even load factor. Essentially, only the last few seats sold on any given flight actually generate pure profit for the company. When a margin is that heavily compressed, external forces become existential threats. During the fourth quarter of 2025 alone, a brief government shutdown combined with a severe shortage of federal air traffic controllers forced flight cancellations that negatively impacted Americans' revenue by approximately $325 million. In aviation, delays cascade through a network. If a plane is held on the ground in Dallas due to air traffic control constraints, the flight it is supposed to operate later that day, out of Chicago, is also delayed. The airline is forced to pay overtime to crews, issue hotel vouchers to stranded passengers, rebook missed connections, and burn excess fuel while holding in the sky. Looking ahead to the first quarter of 2026, the airline accurately estimated that Winter Storm Fern, a massive weather system that disrupted travel across the Midwest and Northeast, would inflict a further negative revenue impact of $150 million to $200 million. When an enterprise operates on a fraction of a percent of margin, there is no room for error. A single winter storm, a brief lapse in federal funding, a sudden spike in global crude oil prices, or a localized operational meltdown can easily push the entire multi-billion-dollar operation into unprofitability. Due to this fragility and a mountain of pandemic and merger debt, the market penalizes the carrier. As of late March 2026, Wall Street valued the entirety of American Airlines at just $7.1 billion. Over the preceding 12 months, the company's market capitalization had decreased by a staggering 29.92%. It is a paradox of scale, touching $54 billion a year, yet valued at a fraction of that, operating more like a hyper-expensive public utility than a profit-making machine. To generate that $54.6 billion in passenger and cargo revenue, an airline requires an immense amount of heavy metal. You cannot physically move 200 million people without a massive physical footprint. In August 2025, American took delivery of its 1,000th mainline aircraft, a Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner, cementing its status as one of the world's largest commercial fleets. Managing an active armada of over 1,000 mainline aircraft requires extreme operational discipline. The data indicates that American relies on a tightly controlled duopoly of Airbus and Boeing airframes to execute its sprawling schedule. The absolute backbone of American's domestic hub and spoke network is its fleet of narrow-body, single-aisle aircraft. Following the delivery of its 1,000th aircraft in August 2025, the structural breakdown highlights a remarkably strong reliance on the Boeing 737 and Airbus A320 family variants. On the Boeing side, the fleet contains 303 older generation 737-800s alongside 78 of the newer, highly fuel-efficient 737 MAX 8s. On the Airbus side, American operates an incredibly dense fleet, including 218 A321s, 133 smaller A319s, 74 next-generation A321neos, and 48 standard A320s. For its international long-haul routes, American completely simplified its strategy during the pandemic era. Prior to 2020, the airline operated a highly fragmented wide-body fleet. The fundamental problem with operating multiple aircraft types is the compounding cost of crew training and maintenance. Recognizing this inefficiency, American aggressively retired its older, maintenance-heavy jets. They permanently grounded their entire fleets of Boeing 757s, Boeing 767s, and Airbus A330s, choosing to rely exclusively on two wide-body workhorses, the Boeing 777 and the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Today, their twin-aisle fleet consists of 47 Boeing 777-200ERs, 20 massive 777-300ERs, 37 787-8s, and 28 787-9s. By standardizing this fleet, American eliminated entire parallel supply chains and vastly increased the flexibility of their crew scheduling. This continuous cycle of fleet renewal provides American with a distinct competitive advantage. Among the major United States legacy network carriers, American currently operates the youngest mainline fleet, averaging an age of just 11.7 years. By comparison, Delta Airlines operates a much older fleet, averaging 16.3 years, while United Airlines' fleet averages 16.8 years. However, maintaining this modern, fuel-efficient armada requires relentless capital expenditure. Airplanes are depreciating assets that require constant upkeep and eventual replacement. By the end of 2025, American anticipated its mainline fleet would reach 1,014 aircraft, driven by the scheduled delivery of 32 additional jets in the final months of the year alone. Looking further out, the financial obligations are staggering. The airline holds firm orders for more than 400 additional aircraft, projecting the delivery of 59 new airframes in 2026, 41 in 2027, and an immense backlog of 276 jets slated for delivery from 2028 onwards. The sheer volume of capital required to fund this continuous hardware pipeline pulls heavily from the airline's $9.2 billion in total available liquidity and consumes a massive portion of its projected $2 billion in 2026 free cash flow. In the aviation industry, you have to spend billions of dollars every single year just to keep your network exactly where it is. When we break down the economics of this operation to a micro per plane level, the underlying math is genuinely brutal. If American Airlines generated exactly $111 million in GAAP net income across a fleet of roughly 1,000 mainline aircraft in 2025, the average net profit per plane is barely $111,000 per year. Consider the gravity of that figure. An airline purchases a piece of highly advanced aerospace engineering, requiring tens of millions of dollars to build and maintain, only for that asset to generate the annual profit equivalent of a moderately successful suburban fast food franchise. The reason the margin is so incredibly compressed lies in the architecture of the hub and spoke system. A massive Boeing 777 flying from New York to London, packed with corporate business class passengers paying thousands of dollars a seat, might print millions in profit over the course of a year. However, that wide-body jet relies entirely on dozens of smaller narrow-body planes flying low-margin, highly competitive domestic routes just to feed those passengers into the New York hub. The airline willingly absorbs the high operating costs of regional connectivity simply to keep the wider intercontinental machine moving. The profitable routes cross-subsidize the unprofitable ones, dragging the average profit per plane down to that $111,000 figure. Beyond the structural design of network routing, American's profitability is currently being suffocated by two specific macro-level forces: debt and labor. Historically, airline mergers and the catastrophic revenue losses of the early 2020s forced carriers to take on extreme financial leverage. American reduced its total debt by $15 billion from its 2021 peak and paid down another $2.1 billion in 2025. Yet, it still ended 2025 carrying $36.5 billion in total debt. In a macroeconomic environment defined by higher-for-longer interest rates, the sheer cost of servicing a $36.5 billion obligation acts as a massive drag on net income. Management aims to bring total debt below $35 billion by 2026 to finally free up capital. Simultaneously, the airline is facing an incredibly expensive labor reset. The commercial aviation workforce is highly specialized and extensively unionized. In 2025, American's total operating expenses rose 3% to $53.2 billion, driven largely by labor costs, which swelled to an astonishing $17.6 billion. The tension between the executive suite's desire for margin expansion and the workforce's demand for better pay reached a boiling point in early 2026. In February, the Association of Professional Flight Attendants, APFA, issued a formal vote of no confidence against American Airlines CEO Robert Isom. The union explicitly cited repeated operational meltdowns, grueling cost-cutting measures, and inadequate scheduling buffers. Further compounding these rising expenses is localized weakness in pricing power. Despite record top-line revenue, American's actual passenger load factor, the percentage of available seats filled with paying customers, declined to 83.6% in 2025, down from 84.9% in 2024. Additionally, its total revenue per available seat mile, TRASM, decreased 1.4% to 18.25 cents. When planes fly slightly emptier and the average ticket yields slightly less revenue, while debt servicing and labor costs simultaneously rise, the strict mathematical result is a catastrophic collapse in profit margin. Unable to shrink to wealth, CEO Robert Isom is orchestrating a strategic overhaul dubbed the Centennial Pivot. Abandoning a race to the bottom against ultra-low-cost carriers, American is pursuing premiumization. The airline is retrofitting its Airbus A319 and A320 narrow-body fleets to significantly increase the density of domestic first-class seats. On the long-haul front, this strategy is anchored by the rollout of the Flagship Suite, an upgraded business-class product featuring 79-inch lie-flat beds and sliding privacy doors, currently being factory-fitted onto newly delivered Boeing 787-9 wide-bodies and their revolutionary new narrow-body jet, the Airbus A321XLR. The Airbus A321XLR is the absolute technological and economic centerpiece of American's late 2020s strategy. Formally integrated into commercial service in December 2025, the A321XLR fundamentally alters the geographic and economic geometry of the global route map. Historically, crossing the Atlantic safely required a massive wide-body aircraft. While highly profitable during the peak summer tourist season, attempting to fill a 300-seat jet during the freezing winter months to a secondary European city incinerates cash. The A321XLR solves this problem. It is a single-aisle plane engineered with an innovative permanent rear-center fuel tank, giving it the unprecedented fuel capacity to cross oceans without the immense weight and drag of a twin-aisle jet. Configured by American Airlines, with a premium heavy layout of just 155 total seats, comprising 20 flagship suites, 12 premium economy seats, and 123 main cabin seats, the aircraft requires vastly fewer passengers to reach its break-even point. Furthermore, Airbus notes that the A321XLR provides up to a 30% reduction in fuel burn per seat. This creates the thin long-haul strategy. American can now fly highly efficient 155-seat planes directly from their East Coast bases to secondary European cities that could never financially support a daily wide-body flight. For the 2026 summer season, American is aggressively deploying the A321XLR on new seasonal routes, such as JFK to Edinburgh, Scotland. Crucially, the aircraft's incredibly low trip costs also enable extended season flying. American scheduled the XLR from Philadelphia to Lisbon, Portugal, during the traditionally unprofitable winter stretch from January through February 2026, preserving market presence while effectively mitigating seasonal losses. However, operationalizing an entirely new aircraft type into a legacy fleet is fraught with regulatory and logistical friction. To comply with strict extended-range twin-engine operations performance standards, ETOPS, the airline had to conduct 42 dedicated check flights between Philadelphia and Edinburgh throughout September 2025. This was required to train crews and dispatchers on the highly unique procedures of the North Atlantic track system. Inside the cabin, the high-density premium layout caused immediate service headaches. As of late 2025, the highly touted sliding privacy doors on the flagship suites were not yet fully FAA certified, meaning the doors had to be physically pinned open and could not be legally closed during taxi, takeoff, or flight. American was forced to proactively offer 5,000 frequent flyer miles as compensation to early premium passengers. Furthermore, the physical design requires passengers to stow swing-out entertainment screens before flight attendants can set tray tables, creating a repetitive stow-and-serve cycle that slows down cabin service. In the main cabin, the absolute logistical constraints of tiny narrow-body galleys forced the airline to test removing bread service entirely just to fit enough hot meals into the ovens. Comparing American to its peers reveals its financial fragility. Let's first look at American's fierce domestic arch-rival, Delta Airlines. In 2025, Delta operated with a roughly similar physical market scale, generating $63.4 billion in total operating revenue compared to American's $54.6 billion. However, Delta is undeniably, structurally, and robustly rich. While American eked out a meager $111 million net income, Delta posted an overwhelming, industry-leading net income of approximately $5 billion. American's profit represented roughly 2% of Delta's earnings, underscoring a vast structural chasm. Delta operated at a highly lucrative 7.9% net margin compared to American's 0.2%. Delta is vastly more profitable because it's transforming into a financial services company that operates aircraft. In 2025, Delta collected an astonishing $8.2 billion in pure cash from its co-branded credit card partner, American Express, an 11% jump over 2024. The Amex cash was 1.4 times larger than Delta's adjusted operating income. This provides Delta with a stable influx of cash that does not fluctuate with winter snowstorms. Buoyed by younger millennial and Gen Z members who reliably spend on credit, Delta management is explicitly aiming to generate $9 billion from the Amex partnership in 2026. Delta further insulates its profit margins through brilliant vertical integration. It is the only major carrier to physically own its own oil refinery, Monroe Energy, purchased in 2012. When global jet fuel prices spiked by $400 million in March 2026, competitors like American saw their margins instantly incinerated. Delta, however, utilized the increased profits generated by its refinery as a natural operational hedge. Additionally, Delta aggressively leverages its highly respected TechOps maintenance division, recently securing a 10-year contract to perform heavy maintenance on UPS's Boeing 757 freighters, driving third-party revenue toward the $1 billion mark. But when you zoom out to state-backed competitors like Air China, the fundamental rules of the aviation game completely change. Profitability is no longer the ultimate metric of success. In 2025, Air China operated a core mainline fleet of over 530 aircraft, carried 160.1 million passengers, and generated approximately $23.4 billion to $24.4 billion in total revenue. Yet, despite this massive scale and flying fully packed planes globally, Air China operated at a stark net loss of roughly $250 million for the 2025 fiscal year. While US executives would face removal for a $250 million loss, Air China is a state-owned enterprise. Its primary goal is not to maximize shareholder dividends, but to act as a winged extension of the Chinese state, securing critical global supply chains and aggressively serving Beijing's industrial policy. So, when looking at the global aviation landscape in 2026, how big and how rich is American Airlines? By physical footprint and gross revenue, it is an undisputed titan. It moves an astonishing $54.6 billion through the global economy annually. It commands an awe-inspiring armada of 1,000 mainline aircraft that project American commerce and tourism across the oceans to Europe, Asia, and South America. But it is not rich. Burdened by $36.5 billion in historical corporate debt that drains its cash flow, saddled with a grueling $17.6 billion annual labor bill, and grappling with the staggering, never-ending capital costs of buying new planes. It operates on a terrifying financial tightrope. While Delta insulates itself with credit card empires and refineries, and Air China operates free from capitalist profitability, American must fight for every fraction of a percent of margin in the bare-knuckle reality of its own balance sheet. The A321XLR and Centennial Pivot represent a surgical attempt to escape this trap via thin long-haul routes. It is an attempt to command higher ticket prices while simultaneously lowering trip costs. But the fundamental, unyielding reality of their business model remains entirely unchanged. Weather will still ground fleets, air traffic control shortages will still cancel flights, labor unions will still demand higher wages, and airplanes will still cost tens of millions of dollars to acquire and operate. American Airlines is a masterclass in the gravity of scale, proof that you can be the biggest player on the board, but keeping the money you make is the hardest maneuver in the sky.